Good evening and welcome to our COVID-19 update. I am Ladi Akiridoluale. Here are the highlights at this hour. 18 states plus the FCT record cases of COVID-19, just as Kaduna State lifts ban on daily prayers and services. Nigeria reports dramatic rise in usage of data as a result of COVID-19, just as Inec prepares stuff for coming elections in the COVID era. And holidaymakers from the United Kingdom race back to base ahead of new COVID-19 travel rules targeting some countries. As Nigeria continues to battle one of the world's most infectious diseases, an addition of 476 new cases in the last 24 hours has brought the country's total confirmed cases of COVID-19 to 50,964. 37,569 of these confirmed cases have been discharged, while 12,403 remain active. The number of COVID-19 related deaths stands at 992 from the last 6 months. A breakdown of the new cases across the states shows Lagos reporting 235 cases, the FCT 44, Kaduna 41, Borno 33, Plateau 28, Abia and Edo 13, Rivers 12, Imo 11, Oyo 10, Kano 9, Kwara 7, Enugu and Katsina 5, Gombe and Ogun 4, while Nasarawa and Zamfara have 1 case each. Meanwhile, the NCDC is asking anyone with symptoms of COVID-19 to call their state hotlines, which is their first line of contact. In Kaduna State, Governor Nasir El-Rufai has lifted the prohibition on daily prayers and services in places of worship, but on condition that worshippers must comply with health protocols. The decision, according to the governor's special advisor on media and communications, Muyiwa Adekeye, is contained in a statement and was taken on the recommendation of the state's COVID-19 task force. Malam El-Rufai says the health protocols are captured in the forward campaign, which includes wearing of face masks, observing physical distancing, practicing respiratory hygiene, washing hands regularly, avoiding large gatherings, remaining indoors as much as possible, and eating immune-boosting diet. It says that the state had imposed the restrictions on all forms of congregational worship on March the 26th to curtail the spread of COVID-19. Although schools in Nigeria are now reopened to students in exit classes, majority of the children are still at home. While many schools have shifted to online learning, some children find it difficult to participate in the classes due to the prevailing digital divide. To help bridge that gap and ensure that no child is left behind in the learning process, a group of individuals have come together to set up a virtual cluster learning program for children in underserved communities. Our next report takes a look at how this is working out.
Statistics from the United Nations Children's Fund state that African youth are the least connected, with around 60% of them not online. While digital technology brings opportunities for learning and education to children, especially in remote regions, digital access is becoming the new dividing line, as millions of the children who could most benefit from digital technology are missing out. 15-year-old Abdul Malik Husseini lives with his grandparents. With schools globally moving to online learning due to the global pandemic, he says studying alone was difficult, but with his tablet, headphones, and notebook, he can now join classes virtually and continue learning.
So during the lockdown, I felt that learning with textbooks and notebooks isn't going to be enough for me. So I came up with the idea of creating things and coding. So having an opportunity like this will help me and build my self-confidence to be sure that, I haven't missed anything during the lockdown.
Margaret Okpoe is 14 years old. She also says learning on her own was tasking, and not being physically in school made it more difficult to focus.
When I was not using this device, I was not really comfortable with the way I was. Sometimes it was boring. I feel like I was not learning anything. But when they gave us the device, sometimes I don't like watching it because I'm busy with it. So it has improved a lot. Because I've been able to learn during this online class, I understand more better in class.
According to UNICEF, digital divides also mirror prevailing economic gaps, amplifying the advantages of children from wealthier backgrounds and failing to deliver opportunities to the poorest and most disadvantaged children. To ensure that children in underserved communities continually have access to education in these times, Slum to School, a volunteer-driven development organization, through its virtual and cluster learning program, is ensuring that almost 1,000 youth are connected to remote learning.
One thing was giving them devices to learn, and that thing was monitoring to be sure that they were learning. And we wanted to be sure that they were also engaging. And so the next question was, how do we ensure that we can engage with them and see that their learning is making some significant progress? So besides the learning management platforms, we also wanted to have a physical engagement, almost like a pseudo classroom.
We set up this studio to ensure that children who were learning previously were not left behind because of the fact that schools were shut down. So we needed an effective and efficient system that could accommodate as many children as possible. And this was just the best solution, for us.
Although there's been a gradual reopening of schools, especially for students in exiting classes, majority of the children are still at home. And as remote learning is fast becoming a norm, ensuring that no child is left out in the learning process is key, so that children like Malik and Margaret can fulfill their potential.
In Adamawa State, the government says it has not recorded any positive case of COVID-19 amongst the exiting secondary school students writing their WAEC exams in that state. This was revealed by the State Commissioner for Education and Human Development during an interview with Channels Television at the end of a week-long tour of all schools conducting the examinations. According to the Commissioner, the state governor was quick in providing the necessary COVID-19 requirements within the time possible for the conduct of the exam.
Adamawa State Monitoring Team supervising the compliance level of secondary schools conducting WAEC exams rounded up the week-long tour today. The teams were divided to cover both public and private schools in the 3 senatorial zones of the state. At the end of the exercise, the Adamawa State Commissioner for Education and Human Development, represented by the Deputy Permanent Secretary of the Ministry, describes the exercise as very successful and worthwhile.
Adamawa State has set in motion, having received funds from His Excellency, we're able to purchase all the necessary requirements and mobilize them to schools on good time. We've also fumigated all the schools in Adamawa State as preventive measures to mitigate the spread of COVID-19.
The Commissioner uses the opportunity to commend principals for ensuring that the regulations put in place are strictly adhered to.
The buckets were placed strategically where we asked them to do. The temperature of the students was also measured by the handheld thermometers that was issued by the Office of the SSG to the state, who is the chairman of the COVID-19 Containment Committee in the state. And also the wearing of face masks by all the students were visibly observed, and it's a commendation to the principals and even the students for complying to directives.
The monitoring exercise will be ongoing, and other social partners are expected to continue in providing assistance so that the necessary information on COVID-19 is adequately received, especially at the rural communities. At the end, it is expected that the mitigation process is enhanced so as to prevent community spread among the existing students.
Leaving education, but because of it, the data usage in Nigeria has increased to 80,000 terabytes as of June 2020, and that's according to the Nigerian Communications Commission. Speaking at the first virtual telecoms consumer parliament The Executive Vice Chairman of the NCC, Professor Umar Dambata, explains that educational and commercial activities have become virtual in the light of lockdowns which were caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, adding that these activities have spiked data usage within Nigeria.
In the wake of the outbreak of the pandemic in Nigeria, the federal government announced different categories of lockdowns which made the mobility and social life of citizens hindered, necessitating the need for individuals, businesses, and public institutions to rely more on telecommunications to constantly keep in touch with their relatives, friends, and more importantly, for running their daily economic activities. Educational activities are also increasingly taking place online following the closing down of schools, while shopping and other activities have migrated to digital platforms online. With all these activities carried out through the internet, network usage is skyrocketing, with many network operators reporting large increase of data usage. According to the statistics from the Department of Policy, Competition and Economic Analysis, the data usage has hit 80,000 terabytes. It has never been this case. And we have noticed from the beginning of this year, this trend of increase in data usage, culminating in this enormous figure in June 2020.
Executive Vice Chairman of the Communications Commission, Professor Umar Dambata. Now, elections are coming up in both Edo and Ondo states. Edo's is on September the 19th, while Ondo will follow on the 10th of October. Inec is definite about ensuring strictly the NCDC COVID-19 protocols in the conduct of the Edo governorship election on September 19th. And it is also training its workers in Ondo State to ensure that there's a hitch-free election over there.
Staff of the Independent National Electoral Commission in Ondo State here in training that will prepare them for the task ahead, the October 10 governorship election in the state. Areas of focus include data collection and reporting, implementation of COVID-19 context, threats and risk indicators, as well as communication strategy and electoral day operations. The national chairman of Inec is represented by his special advisor, Professor Mohammed Kuna.
We'll organize the program together with them, show them how to do that, so that at intervals, at required intervals, they will be submitting information on the progress of what they may be doing as far as these challenges that we have identified are concerned, so that by the time we open polls on October 10th, all these challenges are supposed to have been addressed totally.
The preparation for this election is particularly important for the Commission because of the COVID-19 pandemic, so it is appealing to all the electorates to be mindful of the safety protocols during this period, even as it is preparing for the new normal.
Sensitizing the public about the need for social distancing and about wearing masks, can never be too much, so we need to collectively engage in this and to ensure that our populations are ready for this election.
The use of technology during the election is a major focus of the Commission. One of its partners for the training, deploying latest technology in electoral process, is key to achieving success in the Ondo election.
We have trained about 1,100 masterclass database administrators, and this is a cloud-based system that basically aggregates the processes of the Electoral Commission, noting where there are gaps and challenges towards, of course, addressing these issues and seeing that the elections are credibly conducted.
After the two-day training workshop, participants are expected to be better equipped in their various duties, and hopefully this will have a positive impact on their performance during the coming polls.
Let's talk a bit more about elections during the COVID era. I'm being joined by Mr. Festus Okoye, who is an Inec National Commissioner, as well as the chairman of its Committee on Voter Education and Publicity. Good evening, Mr. Okoye. Thank you for your time this evening.
Good evening. Yes.
The elections were a logistic challenge even before COVID came along. And now with COVID, some are saying it's becoming a nightmare. What preparations have INEC put in place specifically for the next two elections, the big ones in Edo and in Ondo?
Well, the commission realized that it had what we call end of tenure elections in both Edo and Ondo states, and decided to be proactive in relation to some of the protocols and some of the guidelines issued by the Nigerian Center for Disease Control, as well as the Presidential Task Force, on COVID-19. Based on that, we developed our own policy on conducting elections within the context of COVID-19 pandemic. And part of this policy entails that whatever the commission is doing, that we must start on time, since we are dealing with a very uncertain period, dealing with a pandemic that so many people do not have a precedent on how to deal with. So based on that, we have updated all our regulations through the issuance of supplementary regulations. And we have also issued guidelines on how political parties should conduct their campaigns and rallies, and how the voters should comport and conduct themselves when they get to the polling units. So we have taken all these things on board, and we are aggressively training all our staff that will be involved in the conduct of both the Edo and Ondo governorship elections. And because we don't have experience on how these things work, we use the Nasarawa Central State Constituency elections that we conducted on the 8th day of August as a staging point to learn and update ourselves on how to deal with a bigger election. And all the experiences from that particular state constituency election have been harvested, and we are going to adjust and implement some of the recommendations arising from that particular election during the Edo and Ondo governorship elections.
Quite a number of people are concerned because you mentioned the fact that you've issued practice directives, as it were, for the campaigns even before the elections. But from what we've seen, let's take Edo State. Of course, you are in Benin City, the capital of Edo State. That's where you're talking to us from today. The campaigns we've seen, even the visuals that we're showing now, do not show any indication, for example, of social distancing. Quite a lot of people in the audience are not wearing masks and so on. And there are those who will argue that this doesn't bode particularly well for the elections proper, come election day.
Well, you know, the Independent National Electoral Commission issued its own policy, and also they updated its own regulations and guidelines. The Nigerian Center for Disease Control also issued guidelines on various aspects of the electoral process, dealing with pre-election matters, election matters, and post-election day activities. And we also advise all the political parties to also develop their own guidelines on how to deal with issues of campaigns and issues of rallies. And we advise them that what they should do is that in places that has a capacity of 100, that they should take 1/3 of that particular capacity in terms of the number that should be admitted to their rallies and to their campaigns. And we also advise them that anybody who is not wearing a face mask or face covering should not be allowed into their rally grounds and into their campaigns. But as you know, the issue of rallies and the issue of campaigns are part of the fundamental rights enshrined in the Constitution in terms of freedom of association and freedom of assembly and freedom of speech. So we believe that the various state governments have their own quarantine laws, and that political parties and their leaders have a duty and an obligation to make sure that they do not endanger the lives of their supporters. So we have given them the guidelines, and we have asked them to comply with those guidelines. But unfortunately, so many of them are not interested in these guidelines. We believe that they have a responsibility, and we have a shared responsibility in making sure that we observe all the safety regulations and protocols issued by all the health authorities at this uncertain period.
All right, Mr. Okoye, let me put you on pause there. Please stay with us. We're going to take a very short break. When we return, I'm going to ask you about what voters should expect come these two national state elections, rather, coming next month and the month after. So please stay on with us. Thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back to our COVID-19 update. Before the break, we were talking to Mr. Festus Okoye, Inec National Commissioner and Chairman of its Committee on Voter Education and Publicity via Skype from Benin City, the Edo State capital. Mr. Okoye, the truth of the matter is that under the new normal, as most people refer to it now, people should expect things to be different at the polling booths. What is INEC's plan? Because, for example, the election in Edo is less than a month from now. So what should people expect to see? What should they prepare for at the polling booths come that time?
Well, we expect the people of Edo State to turn out en masse to exercise their democratic franchise. They should be assured that this commission places premium on public safety and mitigation of health risk from COVID-19. So to that particular extent, we have made sure that we have procured all the necessary pharmaceutical interventions that the Nigerian Center for Disease Control have recommended. All our staff that are going to be conducting this election are going to wear face masks. They are going to have alcohol-based hand sanitizers, and they have also been properly trained on how to handle crowd control and some other issues. And for the voters, we want them to vote in safety. And based on that, the Commission has issued a voter code of conduct for the purposes of this election. And we have made it very clear that any voter that does not have a face mask or a face covering will not be allowed into the polling unit, and that particular voter will not vote. Secondly, we are liaising with communities and with public-spirited organizations to provide water and soap so that those who are entering the polling unit will wash their hands with soap and get their hands ready to exercise their voting rights. We have also made it very clear that we are providing methylated spirit to clean our smart card readers so that we don't infect anybody through that particular means. And all our ad hoc staff have also been trained to make sure that there's periodic disinfection of the polling units as the voting continues. And then the issue of physical distancing will also be observed. We noticed that in the Nasarawa Central State Constituency elections, in a few of the polling units, people refused to observe physical distancing. So we have taken that lesson on board, and we have also we are going to recalibrate the configuration of the polling units so that we can mark out the places where people are going to be on election day. And as you know, we have created a two-tier queuing system at the polling unit, an inner cordon and an outer cordon. And our assistant presiding officer 3 will be letting people into the inner cordon in batches to guarantee physical distancing during this particular election. So we have made adequate provisions that will protect the health of the people. And even in our registration area centers, we have surveyed them and assessed them, getting them fit for purpose so that we can deliver on our core mandate, which is to organize, undertake, and supervise elections. So we are not joking with the health of the people. And we assure the people of Edo State and the people of Ondo State that we have taken all containment measures that will enable them to vote in safety.
Finally, I must ask you about the Inec staff themselves, those you referred to who are going to do most of this controlling. Of course, the report that we had from Ondo State indicates that some form of training is going on for the staff. If we take what has happened with quite a number of medical personnel and this COVID-19, their relationship with the public has led to quite a number of them being infected. Is there any kind of provision to ensure that that doesn't possibly happen with Inec staff, particularly the ones who are going to be employed as ad hoc staff?
Well, we are working collaboratively with the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, and we have a liaison officer attached to the Independent National Electoral Commission. So we have been receiving advice from him, and we have also been receiving advice from our own health personnel attached to the commission. We are going to have voluntary testing of some of these our ad hoc staff before and after elections, and we are also collaborating with the different ministries of health in terms of making provision for emergency intervention at the polling units in case any of them develops any symptom or has any health challenge. And we're also liaising with them to make sure that at strategic places, maybe in registration areas, we have ambulances that can convey people who are critically ill to the hospitals. So we are taking all these things on board. We are not leaving any stone unturned, and we want to protect all the people who are going to serve this nation, either as collation officers, as presiding officers, as assistant presiding officers, or as supervisory presiding officers. So we are taking all these things on board, and we are also listening to all the advice from the health authorities in terms of the measures we need to put in place to make sure that people vote and vote in safety.
Indeed, thank you very much, Mr. Okoye, for the information this evening. Of course, we will be bringing you back as the elections draw much closer to update us on this so that the voters and all those stakeholders remain quite confident about what will happen during these elections. But thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.
The Taraba State government says it will not in any way lower its guard in the enforcement of safety measures to curtail the spread of COVID-19 through the transport sector. But as part of the government's stance, most workers in the sector still shun its directives as they go about their daily activities without taking responsibility for their health.
Taraba residents entering motor parks without personal protective equipment and even shunning safety measures despite directives by the government on safety protocols. But it is compulsory for passengers to wear the face masks and observe physical distancing when inside the vehicles.
The compliance level is interesting because, as you can see, instead of carrying three people, they are just loading 2 people on the seat, and everybody is carrying his masks. We want to believe that the compliance is well taken.
While compliance to the NDDC guideline is meant to be strictly adhered to by travelers, transport operators say it has also affected the cost of transportation in keeping to the physical distancing rule.
We decided to increase the price from 10,000 initially as in Lagos route to 15,000. And again, sometimes instead of carrying like 9 passengers, we hardly even get the 9.
All right, the report from Taraba talking about compliance with public transportation. Joining me in our studios here to look at the forthcoming governorship elections, both in Edo and Ondo, and the medical side of things from what Mr. Okoye of Inec had told us is consultant public health physician, Dr. Doyin Okuyemi. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you for having me.
The Inec National Commissioner has reeled out quite a number of things. Do those things give you, as a medical practitioner, confidence that all those involved in the electoral process will be safe during these elections? You're taking your time to answer.
So ideally, we want to avoid any kind of crowding as much as possible. So I did hear, some of these things to consider safety measures so that we can reduce the risk.
Right.
So there is some risk.
We can't avoid that.
We can't avoid that. The only way we could have avoided that is to say no elections or electronic voting, which is not the case. But we can reduce it to the barest minimum. So I would think a lot has to do with what happens before the process itself, which is the planning stage. Okay, so in the planning, knowing that these are the risks involved and ensuring that crowd is controlled as much as possible, that's the main thing here. So how can that happen? Would you have many more polling stations? When people get there, would they know exactly what to do? So before then, there should be voter education on one side. There should also be the education for the staff. So if everybody is on board that kind of education, then they know exactly what will happen even before the day. We cannot risk, for instance, people being there much early in the morning, say from 6 a.m., and you don't have materials till, say, 2 p.m. That can't happen.
Which were things that were already part of the electoral process in some way before COVID.
Before COVID. So that's when I say proper planning. We need to think through all of the steps of voting. And if we think that we don't want crowds to gather and we also don't want close contacts, we should think clearly about all those steps. We must do a demo at some of these polling stations. Where will people stay? One point to the other. There are some points that are really high risk, where people are going to either put their thumbprints and then remove it. These are surfaces a lot of people would touch. So
well, he did mention, my apologies, he did mention that they were going to use methylated spirit to clean the card readers, which is the point at which you are thumbprinting. And so is that perfectly in order?
That's good. But at the same time, the people too should be able to wash their hands even before exiting the venue.
Right.
So there should be points where there should still be hand sanitizers. If you do on the side of the card readers and on the person's side, then that's double kind of control.
Right.
You also want to ensure that the staff a lot of people will be interfacing with, I heard you ask that question,
yes,
will be very safe. Because in their own case, a lot of people are coming to meet them. Apart from being safe, they must also model good examples. So before, during, so even during now, we want to ensure that the staff themselves are models of good examples. They wear masks. And let us get them masks that they can breathe through easily and wear for long periods of time. Let's also ensure there are compliance officers around, just to remind people, please wear your face mask, please stand here, please stay here. We should consider people like the elderly that will come and vote too. When they come to such places, they shouldn't stay for too long. There will be people that would have a temperature when they come. What's the plan for such people? Will they be disenfranchised, or will they be moved to a side to do their voting and leave the place immediately? If staff is sick or reports sick Are there extra staff to replace such people that are sick? And even if we do everything, we must also be ready for the after. So be ready to increase our level of surveillance. So let's heighten surveillance after. Let's heighten testing after. Let's search for cases. And let us have, a list of people that have come to different polling areas so that to some extent we can contact them even afterwards if there are any issues. So before, during, after, all of these things must be properly planned and delivered and implemented to ensure that, afterwards we can still maintain some level of safety.
Well, I put this question to Mr. Okoye, and I'm going to put it to you, because everything you've said is correct, and probably a lot of people would see reason with it. But then those who are going to do the implementing, in this case, the people who are going to be in the majority, which is the voters, going by what happened or what is happening in the process of the campaigns, it doesn't indicate that they either understand the gravity of what is happening or accept that these preventive measures are critical to being able to go do their franchise and come back without coming back with anything they didn't take there. Is there any way you would recommend that aspect of it? Because his position was that they've done that which they could. It's now up to personal responsibility for your health. Is that your position too? Would that be it?
Well, I think we shouldn't leave all that responsibility to the voters. So I would think that even during campaigns, politicians who are calling for campaigns should also model good example. Ideally, it should be 50% capacity.
Right. That's another guideline that is not necessarily being followed.
That is not being followed. And that's the guideline from the NCDC. It should be 50% capacity at the rallies. And probably some of it should be both on-site and online. Telling the person who wants a lot of people to come vote for them is a bit tricky. But ideally, you should model good behavior, even what you do on the stage while campaigning or talking to people, ensuring that, hands are sanitized and you're using your mask properly. And it should be part of the message that goes out, that in all of this, we want you to be safe. So please do so, and so. I don't think we should leave it alone to the voters. It should be part of the voter education. And even at the venues of the polling, there should be instructions that tell people what they need to do to keep safe at such venues.
There are some states, for example, Kaduna today has lifted the ban on daily prayers, and it's fairly certain that others will follow suit. The initial decision that it should be limited to Fridays and Sundays was based on medical advice. Does this now mean that on the basis of what people like you now see and know, that it is okay to allow more and more of these gatherings, of course, with the caveat that all the protocols continue to be observed?
I don't think so. I think that the more we allow ourselves to be together, the higher the chances. The more we stay apart, the lower the chances. I can understand that people are really getting fatigued about this issue of keeping these measures. But the virus is not out yet. And it moves with people. We will keep saying it. It moves with people. We do not have the vaccine yet to say we are free. WHO report says we should wait another 2 years before we can say it's over. So I would still say that we need to be very cautious in these releases that we're allowing by the day. And we should match it with resources that in case this doesn't go as planned in terms of safety, do we have resources to ensure that sick people can get help?
I must ask you, of course, talking about these openings and so on, I must ask you also about the issue of flights, because that's some other thing that is also being opened, and people are saying, okay, is this because we've got a handle on the crisis now and therefore we can allow people to come and go? What do you think?
I think it's the pressure on the economy, and it's just trying to get that fine balance between safety and the economy. But I think that we should also know when to press the brakes. And that's why more than ever, with every new opening we're doing, there should also be heightened surveillance such that we can trace where the issues are. If we allow flights, what is it like for those who have gone on domestic flights? We should monitor all such that closely.
And get feedback from them.
And get feedback from those particular population of people. We've allowed students write exams. What is it like immediately after the exams? So not just general figures now, but ones that we can say, with respect to this particular activity, this is how it has gone. And that should guide what we do and do not do. We can't stay in perpetual lockdown, in our lives, as it were. But it should be cautious, and it should be backed with a lot of science in whatever we're doing.
All right, then. Thank you so very much, Dr. Ogunyemi, for your time this evening. We'll keep calling on people like you, because as each one happens, as each thing happens, as it goes on and comes off, we're going to need explanations. We're going to need guidance going forward. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Let's go outside our shores, where it's been a week since South Africa moved to level 2. And while the recovery rate has risen to 82%, the COVID-related death toll crossed the 12,000 mark this week. One of the notable recoveries is former leader of the Inkatha Freedom Party, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, who turns 92 next week. Channels Television spoke to Professor of Public Health and member of the Gauteng Advisory Committee on COVID, Professor Lekon Ayo Yusuf, on the picture behind the current numbers.
Cabinet has decided to place the entire country on alert level 2.
It's been a week since the announcement by government that South Africa will be moving to level 2 lockdown, and the number of confirmed cases remain relatively lower, while recovery rate has risen to 82%. We asked Professor of Public Health and Deputy Vice Chancellor of the Sefako Makgato Health Sciences University in Pretoria, who tells us what he sees beyond the numbers.
Where we are now is that we've been able to address hotspots, and that's the truth. We were responding to understanding the pattern of the spread, and it became clear that were particular areas that they spread where they were called the super spreaders. So there was super spreading in certain provinces and certain areas. And the strategy then changed to focus on those areas, test so many people in those areas, isolate them, and that began to have what we see now as the numbers going down. Having said that, it does not mean places outside of those areas are immune from having infection or from becoming hotspots tomorrow.
So do you think this interprovincial travel that's been approved now may be a problem?
Yeah, I mean, it's a potential problem. Again, if we abide by the rules, we need to take, I think I cannot overemphasize the need to take this extra precaution. The fact that the economy is open, it does not stop you from getting infected.
While some countries have set dates for opening up of their airspaces and probably borders for international travel, South Africa is still watching for now, and all borders, air, land, and sea, remain closed.
At this stage, international travel could still be a problem because, as you can imagine, when somebody moves across miles, once one person is infected in a plane, and they go across another. When they land here, they're not going to be in Johannesburg. They just go across. So one plane that is having more than 2 or 3 people infected become a super spread. So I would say until the world is balanced, because right now, if you have a control in Nigeria and control in South Africa, and then you can't control it in Uganda, it just takes a flight from Uganda to make Nigeria and South Africa go back to where they were.
Government is continuing the appeal for caution and adherence to hygiene safety measures, as everyone hopes the figures will get even better. Meanwhile, the COVID-related death toll crossed the 12,000 mark in the country this week. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Betty Dibia for the COVID-19 update.
British holidaymakers who wish to avoid 14 days of quarantine are racing to get back to the United Kingdom before new COVID-19 travel rules kick in. From Saturday, that's tomorrow, those arriving in the United Kingdom from Croatia, Austria, and Trinidad and Tobago will need to self-isolate for 14 days. Here's more on other developments on our global update.
Doctors in most public hospitals in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, have gone on strike in protest against unpaid wages and a lack of protective equipment.
We do not want to die in our hospitals. Hospitals are run by money, and if this money is being stolen, we will not have hospitals. It is time we stand as Kenyans, it is time we stand as youth, it is time we stand as human rights defenders to defend this country.
Lebanon has begun a 2-week partial lockdown, including a nighttime curfew following a spike in cases. Infections have doubled since a devastating blast in the capital, Beirut, killed hundreds and injured thousands more on August the 4th, placing massive strain on medical facilities. Hit by a resurgence of coronavirus cases, Hong Kong is to offer free coronavirus testing to all of its 7.4 million residents from the 1st of September. Chief Executive Carrie Lam says the testing will be voluntary and take around 2 weeks to complete.
This type of universal community testing free of charge available to asymptomatic people may not be a priority. But given the severity of this current wave and the fact that we still have 30 to 40% of cases with unknown sources, which means that there is still quite a number of silent transmitters in community. So the more that we could test and the earlier we could find the remaining outstanding cases.
Meanwhile, South Korean health officials warn that a cluster of coronavirus infections in the capital, Seoul, is threatening to spread after thousands of people attended a rally by conservative political groups last week. While many of the current spike in cases have been among members of a church, some whom attended the rally, officials say more people need to come forward and be tested to head off an uncontrollable outbreak. And finally, Peru is on high alert due to the increased cases of coronavirus in children. According to data from the country's health ministry, there are over 23,000 cases of infected children in Peru. 108 children and teenagers with coronavirus have died, the majority due to pre-existing complications such as cancer. The government has banned all family gatherings and has limited the time children spend outdoors to 30 minutes, accompanied by their guardians or parents.
That's our COVID-19 update for tonight and for this week. But there's more on the cases, figures, and numbers in Nigeria, Africa, and indeed around the world. Do visit our website, channelstv.com. There you'll find these updates. And of course, there are other stories there on politics, business, and sports, amongst others. We'll be back on Monday at noon and then at 6 and 9 p.m. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Ladia Akredulu Ali. Do stay safe and have a nice weekend.